What a terrible way to spend a Friday afternoon. Before I'm introduced, can I just tell you something? You see these people sitting on the sides on the steps? I think those of you who have seats should auction them off and find out what the real value of this is. Of course, you can only do that when there are no seats available, or when the cost of moving from one place to another is very high. The alternative is we're going to sing the Stern Stewart EVA song. So rather than doing that, I'll just hope that they're almost finished up here. What's happening? How you doing there?
Making progress.
Yeah. The reason he's making a mess of this is because he went to graduate school in Bogota instead. No. He wants to remember his alumni, his school. There we go. So, am I going to do it, or are you going to do it?
However you like.
No, I'd like to do it. You have a little gizmo?
¿Tienes un control? Para pasar los slides? Okay. For now, I'm gonna do it.
Soy mí.
Ya, por favor.
Ok, bueno, entonces buenas tardes. Básicamente, pues el señor Stern lo voy a introducir muy rápidamente. El señor Stern quiere pues que la introducción no sea muy larga. So, Mr. Stern, we welcome you to Universidad.
The microphone is not working.
Ah, sorry. Mr. Stern, we welcome you to Universidad de Afit. Besides Mr. Stern, we also welcome Mr. Fabian Rodriguez. Mr. Stern is Chairman and Chief Executive Officer of Stern Stewart and Company. And besides that, he's been a professor at 6 different universities, including the University of Chicago, Columbia, Carnegie Mellon, the University of Cape Town, Singapore Management University, and Universidad Francisco Marroquín in Guatemala. So, Mr. Stern, we are delighted to have you here at Universidad de Afit. Thank you very much for your presence.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure. Huh? Yeah. I should warn you that I am so old that I was there at the creation. Not of the world, but of the world of modern finance. I was minding my own business, to be honest. I was a student in the economics department at the University of Chicago, known as the Mother Church. Known as the Mother Church, and we had our own library. Okay, only the economics students were permitted to use this. And one day, when I was in the library, a fellow came to the library and tried to come in. And when I saw him, I went running over and I said, "Hey, listen, you're not one of the economics students. You're not allowed in here." He said, "But don't you believe in free markets?" I said, "I do, but I also believe in zoning laws. And this is our zone and not yours, so get the hell out of here." So he said to me, "Who are you?" And I told him my name. He said, "Oh, you're Milton Friedman's research assistant." "Yeah," I said, "right." I said, "Who are you?" He said, "My name is Eugene Fama." I said, "Who do you work with?" He said, "Merton Miller." I said, "I never heard of him. Get out of here." So he invited me to come to a PhD seminar that was conducted by Merton Miller. And I remember what happened after I was there for the 2 hours. I called Milton at home. It was kind of late in the day. And I said, "I think I'm going to switch over into the business school for a while. I need to find out more about what Merton Miller is doing." And he said, "If you do that, you'll never come back." Milton was right, as usual. Well, anyway, Stern Stewart is a company I formed in order to apply the theories of modern finance to real-world decisions, to real-world problems. Problems in the boardroom, problems for senior management. I began with the story of valuation. You take a class in finance, say here, and they'll teach you what determines the value of a firm. But I've got a surprise for you. They've got it wrong. Yeah, they do. It's an amazing thing. See, when I went into the business school, the dean of the school later became Secretary of State and Secretary of everything else for Ronald Reagan. His name was George Shultz. He was a brilliant labor professor, and he was my professor of labor economics in the economics department, and I really liked him a lot. He was a very quiet person. And I said, what should I do? He said, well, if you take just one course, we'll give you an MBA. Because we'll credit all your econ courses into the business economics MBA program. I said, that sounds like a good deal. He said, yep. I said, what's the course? He said, accounting. It was the worst experience of my life. Actually, my ex-wife was much worse, but I'm not allowed to talk about that, okay? I'm sworn to secrecy. What was so terrible about the accounting class? Well, first of all, it was a room just like this, except everybody was required to sit alphabetically because accountants like order at all times. So the person sitting where you are, sir, his name was Barry Ogg, A-A-G-H. He never had a chance. He was going to sit right there. And Stern was sitting somewhere all the way up there, see? And the way the course began was most unusual. The accounting professor said, I want you to tell me how we should measure company performance. And he turned to Barry Ogg and said, Ogg, what do you think? And Ogg said, it's net profit after tax. You think they stopped there? No. They asked every other student the same question. Can you believe this? The reason, obviously, is they don't have enough material for a full semester. So they asked everybody the same question. And everybody said more or less that earnings, the bottom line, blah, 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 blah. It gets to me out here, and I say to the professor, listen, it's not the bottom line. It's not possible. And he said, Stern, in this class, it is the bottom line. I'll give you a second chance. And I said, it's the bottom line. He said, what made you change your mind? I said, in the economics department, they taught us that there's a price for everything, and I want to get out of here alive. And he said, I'm curious to know why you thought it was not the bottom line. And I said, well, you know, in accounting, I understand you're not allowed to read ahead, but last night your textbook fell on the floor and opened to chapter 17. And that chapter was on a subject called intangibles. I was interested in finding out what that was, so I started reading. I couldn't believe it. Does anybody here know what accountants do with intangible investments? That means we train and develop our people, or we invest in R&D, research and development, or we build long-term brand value, like Coca-Cola, like Kleenex tissues, like you name it, Amazon, whatever. But we're building long-term brand value. What happens to the investment that takes place in those three areas? Does anybody know? What do the accountants do with that information? Don't all raise your hands at once. I'll tell you what they do. They write it off in the current year. They're assuming that there is no economic life to that investment after the current fiscal year is over. And they say, we're conservative. Well, I would say, you're stupid. Why would you do something like that? And what's the reason? The reason should always be, in general principle, what is good for corporate governance. Right now, as you can see from the title, hey, there's a big problem in corporate governance. You don't believe it? Even take a look at the attack on company executive remuneration. Everybody's after these people, especially people who are left of center politically. The question is, what's the answer to all of those things? And believe it or not, the answer is all the same. It's called, to quote Peter Drucker, the late professor of management, out of sight, out of mind. What gets measured gets managed. If you don't record those investments on the balance sheet, who is going to remember in future years that we spent all that money? Yep. Not a good thing. When I teach modern finance, I talk about the shortcomings of the accounting model of the firm. They take income from the income statement. They take, where are you going? Uh-oh. Oh, gee. I thought I was going to be anonymous here. That's the end of that idea. Incidentally, I used to appear as a rotating panelist on the television program Wall Street Week with Louis Rukeyser on Friday evenings. But my nickname was Pluto, because I was the rotating panelist who rotated the least frequently. Okay? And they found that my greatest appeal was to women over the age of 77. Not a good thing for my reputation. Every time I heard the sound of an ambulance, I thought I was losing one of my viewers. Not a good thing. Not a good thing. Anyway, let me just go back to what I was saying. The most important thing in the field of finance, in my view, is to understand what determines the value of the firm. Okay? That's the big thing. And unfortunately, the accountants do not have it right. And where the accounting model is most weak is that the accounting model of measuring performance does not talk about risk anywhere. Any investment, any expense, it all counts the same. There is no required rate of return for risk. In fact, if you take a look at the accounting model, there are two major shortcomings. I've already told you one. The first one is intangible investments do not appear on the balance sheet, with the exception of goodwill. Even restructuring costs are written off immediately. What a dumb idea that is. They should put it on the balance sheet as an asset. If you're investing in restructuring your firm and it's worthwhile, let's find out. We'll measure the return on the investment over the life of the investment. But if it's not going to appear on the balance sheet, who the hell is going to remember? Out of sight, out of mind. What gets measured, gets managed. Don't forget that. Real important. There's another big problem. You won't believe this. Executive compensation, and probably compensation throughout the economy, may not be following an appropriate pattern. I realize I'm violating my own principle in economics, which says markets get what markets want. But there are times when innovation matters, and this is one of those times. Listen to this. Most of you, I'm sure, are familiar with a concept called the cost of capital. It's actually the required rate of return for risk. Let's assume there is such a thing. Then clearly, projects that earn more than the cost of capital are creating sustainable value for the shareholders. That place where the returns are below the required rate of return for risk, they're busy destroying value. And the question I began to ask myself when I came out of the University of Chicago, and incidentally, I have to admit this to you, I went to see Friedman and I said, you know, you're right, the money supply matters. I don't have any. I've run out of money. And he said, we'll get you a job at the Chase Manhattan Bank, now known as J.P. Morgan Chase. And I said, why are we going to do that? He said, because David Rockefeller was my classmate at the University of Chicago, and he owes me big time. And so he set up the interview, and Mr. Rockefeller said to me, young man, what are you going to do for us at the Chase Bank? And I said, I have no idea. He said, you're hired. I said, how come? I need some people to tell me the truth around here. It was very interesting. I'm not joking. And in fact, by the way, in the very first week I was at the bank, I discovered to my astonishment, I went out with a guy who was in charge of lending money to this part of the world. From Mexico, south to Chile and Argentina, Frank was in charge of lending that money. And I said, can I ask you a question, Frank? Why are you lending money to Brazil and Argentina? By my calculation, those loans are never going to be repaid. And he said, my bonus is based on loan volume, not loan repayment. He actually said that to me. So I went back to see Mr. Rockefeller the following week, and I said, sir, let me tell you what the answer is. The reason they're lending money to these countries and are not going to repay us is that the incentives are based on loan volume and not loan repayment. And David Rockefeller said to me, how would you fix it? Well, I wouldn't make the bonus based on sales, that's for sure, but if we're stuck with it, then let's make sure the bonus is only paid out based on the original amortization schedule of the debt. That way, if they don't pay us back, the bonuses that are declared are canceled. And so he implemented that policy immediately, and I became world famous at the Chase Bank for the guy to be most avoided. Don't spend any time with Joel, because if you tell him, the chairman will find out, and we'll all be dead. Just like that. Isn't that interesting? I can see you don't care about that, so I'll go back to my original subject. Okay, so I claim that what we need to do is look at a basic valuation model and find out what determines the value of the firm. And in my view, the generic model for valuation says that the valuation of the firm is equal to, now picture this, a numerator and a denominator. In the numerator, we have expected future corporate returns. I'm not telling you what the returns are. The accountants say it's bottom line profit. Well, they're wrong about that. But we're going to substitute something else, okay? So the numerator is expected future corporate returns, and in the denominator, there is a required rate of return for risk. That's it. There are only two variables. Numerator, engine that drives value. Denominator, the required return for risk. Well, what we have to do is resolve how to do that. And I've got bad news. You'll never get the information right from the accounting model of the firm. Okay, that's one thing for sure. So forget about that. And so I said to myself, why don't I try to figure out what the numerator should be? Let's see if we got it up there. Let me stand up here and turn around and see what's going on behind my back. There it is. See that? Oh, that's nice. Can we have the next one? Right. This is really shocking. Now here's the accounting model. They take turnover or revenue and subtract out, this is not right, okay, yes. They subtract out 4 cash outs. Cost of goods sold, selling, general, and administrative expense, interest expense, and taxes paid, and there you are. There's the bottom line. The bottom line. The way you can tell the accountants think that's important is they always put 2 lines underneath it. See, if you don't know where to go on the income statement, just keep going down till you get to 2 lines. That's it. And that's the bottom line. So they should call it the bottom line, double underline. Okay, that way we know it's important. But I said, no, that can't be right. What matters is this model over here. We'll start with turnover, all right, and subtract out not 4 cash outs, but 3. The same thing, including, but taxes paid. This is actually not right. They have taxes provided for it. But this is actual cash payments. And you get something called the operating profit of the firm. We call it NOPAT. N-O-P-A-T, net operating profit after tax. And what is that? It's EBIT, earnings before interest and taxes, but after taxes. Okay? N-O-P-A-T. I did this in California, by the way, in front of a business audience, and one CEO raised his hand and said, "That's my company." I said, "What?" He said, "Yes, we have no profits after taxes." And he was being serious. I decided to leave quickly out of fear that he had a contagious disease and I might catch it. Okay? But you see, we don't stop there. According to Modigliani and Miller, not in their original paper in '58, but their paper in 1961, which I personally believe is the much more important paper from a practical standpoint. That paper is called Dividend Policy, Growth, and the Valuation of Shares. You should read it cover to cover. It'll take you a long time because there's math in there. Assume the math is right and just keep going. I'm not kidding, but that is one of the finest papers ever written, okay? Especially footnote 15. You read footnote 15, and your parents will not recognize you afterwards. From that point forward in your life, you'll be a different person entirely. And it will be all to the good. Now here's what I'm doing. I take NOPAT, but I don't stop. I subtract out new investment on the balance sheet. This is increases in net working capital and plant. And if you subtract these two from NOPAT, you get something called the free cash flow. And I must tell you, I termed this free cash flow in a paper I published back in 1971. Okay? It was called Earnings Per Share Don't Count, Free Cash Flow is What Matters. And that was the way it was published. It was just a beautiful piece, I really must tell you. But here's the big question. If in fact the valuation model is that guy up on top, where the numerator is expected future corporate returns, Joel Stern is saying it's free cash flow that matters. We can also call that distributable cash. It's cash available for distribution to both lenders and to shareholders. That's what determines the value of the firm. Okay? But I have a big problem. By the way, the reason I'm moving this is that in the United States, the unions slap my hand if I try to do this. But notice, in Colombia, you can get away with moving the furniture. Yes, sir. It makes me feel good. Here comes the big question. When I start my course on the very first night, I do exactly what I've shown you here. And at this point, I ask one of my students to answer the most difficult question they will face the entire semester. Do we want the year-by-year changes in free cash flow? Do we want the amounts to be positive, 0, or negative to maximize value? No student in 35 years of teaching that course has ever gotten the answer right. Not one. Isn't that a shame? They all say, oh, positive free cash flow. Well, I'm going to show you on the next slide. Next slide. Ah, there they are. You see these two diagrams? That's diagram 1, that's diagram number 2. I told my dean, his name is Glenn Hubbard, he's our dean at Columbia Business School. When he came into my class, he sat through my lecture, poor guy. And I said, Glenn, if my students were to understand these two diagrams and nothing else, I would give them an MBA degree. And when the lecture was over, I said, what do you think? He said, I agree with you, but I need the revenue from the other 19 courses. It's always nice to know he's thinking about the students. We're going to study these two diagrams because that's where my little creation EVA comes from, and I'll show you why I also reject free cash flow and its model, even though it works fine for pricing acquisitions. There is someplace else it does not work at all well. We're going to wrap that up in a very important topic. It's the topic of why managements consciously invest in negative net present value projects. Why would management purposely destroy value in their own companies? That's the question. And I'm going to try to answer that for you today. Okay? Yeah. Did you just arrive, dear? You missed the song. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. We're going to answer the question about positive, 0, and negative free cash flow at the same time. Watch this. In diagram number 1, what we're doing is we're measuring risk to the right and we're measuring rewards to the north. If an investor takes no risk at all, that investor should be able to buy some form of government debt. We call it a riskless security. But as you move to the right on the risk map, investors will demand higher rewards going the other way. And this line going up from that origin is busy pricing risk. That's what its job is. It's pricing risk in the real world. Well, it turns out if you study things as we have at Stern Stewart, and if you call the average risk by the number 100, then on average around the world, electric utilities score 50. That is, they're considered to be half as risky as the average company traded. Okay? So they would score 50 where the average risk is 100. The next group of companies up are the food companies. They score 80. But they take brand risk. They want to sell you the Kellogg cereal, see? But the grocery store that sells the food actually is down at around 65. The question is why? They don't take brand risk. They carry all the brands they need to, so they're not bearing that risk at all. And believe it or not, their score would be down around 65. Around 100? Until recently, that's where the banks were. What are the banks doing? They're supposed to be lending money to a diverse part of the economy so that on average they take about average risk. But once the banks did what they did beginning in year 2007, now the banks are sitting up at about 135. That's one of the reasons why their market-to-book ratios are so lousy. They did it to themselves. In other words, they convinced the market that they didn't care about value. They were going for size over everything. Big mistake, big mistake. And they're now stuck all the way out here someplace. It's a terrible business. Between 120 and 140, you find the basic cyclical industries: steel, cement, aluminum, textiles, autos, industrial machinery, machine tools. What do they all have in common? Very high fixed costs. And so therefore, as the turnover goes up and down over the business cycle, their NOPAT and their operating cash flows are very volatile compared to the companies that are to the left of 100. Okay, so we're looking at risk and reward here in diagram number 1. Now let's assume that we find out where a firm is on the risk map. We go up and across, and suddenly we come to C, which is the cutoff rate, or I would like to call it the required rate of return for risk. Any question about that? Anybody? Anybody want to say anything? Does anybody care? Are you out there? It's Friday afternoon. What are you doing here? Yes. Diagram number 2. That's the entire marketplace. This is a single company. On the horizontal axis here, we're measuring investment. On the vertical axis, we're measuring return on investment. In America, we call it RONA, R-O-N-A, where N-A is net assets. I don't want to go into the details of why it's net and not gross assets right now, but if a firm took its best projects first and its worst projects last, and it rank ordered them by RONA, that line coming down would be supposedly prioritizing on their investments. For simplicity, I'm assuming that all the investments on this diagram are of equivalent risk. Otherwise, we'd have to have a different diagram than we have here, okay? So what do is we take the required rate of return from diagram 1 and move it across to diagram 2. And now all of these investment opportunities fall into one of 3 categories. Either they are upstairs in category 1, where the returns are clearly above C. Second category is where the returns are equal to C. And the third one is where the returns are below C. Are you ready for a shock? First research in this area, we discovered that firms that are in category 1 have their market values above their net asset values. Those firms that are at category 2, their market values are equal to their net asset values. And those firms that are in category 3, they're making profits all right, but the profits are too low. And therefore their market values are below. Sorry. Sorry. Okay. Very nice. He left. Okay. And so from this, the general principle follows. If you want to maximize value, the objective is to find projects in category 1, hopefully, and then the market value of the firm will be greater than its net asset value. Not only that, keep in mind this. That's true instantaneously. The firm makes the investment, and the market value, even before the investment generates the future returns, is present valuing those future returns such that the market value is instantly above its net asset value. So therefore, let me ask you this question. What is the objective function of the firm? What should the firm try to do? Now, most people who answer this question will say, to maximize value, but that's not helpful. I want to do it within what we have up here in diagrams 1 and 2. In other words, what should our goal be as a firm if we want to maximize value? What do we want to do? Okay, anybody want to volunteer? You got to raise your hand so I can see you. Yes? Invest in category 1 projects. Now here's another question. Let's assume my best project is 30% after tax. My next best project is at 22% after tax. They're all above C. Do I take the 30% project and no other projects? Because after all, that's what will maximize RONA. See, the question is my goal to maximize RONA? That means I take one project at 30% and I'm finished. What do you think about that idea? Same person. He's going to turn the camera around in a minute, don't worry. Your mother will see you. Your mother will see you on TV, that's for sure. Yeah. So what do you think? You're not sure. Anybody want to volunteer? Okay, listen to this. Almost every CEO, I don't care whether the CEO is here in this city, in Bogota, in the world, at large, they all say the same thing. The goal is to maximize RONA. And they are dead wrong. The goal is to take on all Category 1 projects. Not only that, you're not supposed to rank order them by RONA. You want to rank order them, as you'll see, based on EVA. And what's the reason? What if the first project at 30% is only a $1 million project, but the second project, say at 22%, is a $10 billion project? Well, the net present value of the second one is much higher than the net present value of the first one. It's the net present value that matters. Okay? So here's my question. Let me go back to my original question I just asked before. Do we want the free cash flows to be positive, zero, or negative? That's the question. And what do you think the answer is? Anybody want to guess? The answer is it depends. If we have a very, very large number of Category 1 projects for now and well into the future, the answer should be we want to invest in every one of them and only be limited by the number of capable managers we can find to run the projects. In other words, we want new investment, to be greater than NOPAT. Free cash flow is NOPAT minus I. If I is greater than NOPAT, free cash flow is negative. We want the free cash flows to be negative, if possible, all the way out to the year infinity minus 1. That should be our goal. And if that's the case, what's the optimal dividend policy for the firm? A negative dividend policy. You tell the shareholders, not are we never paying you anything until infinity minus 1, but we're going to periodically ask you for even more money. And I claim the shareholders will be applauding like crazy when they are not taking cash out of their pockets and throwing it up onto the stage to invest in additional equity. Oh yes, the more the merrier. But here's the big problem. How will investors know or believe that the projects that we're going to undertake are going to be in Category 1? I don't have a slide for what I'm about to tell you, so I just want you to pretend with me. Listen to this. Pretend we have a line going across, and it is a risk map, but it has to do with compensation. I've got news. Salaries and pension are considered to be senior liability claims of the firm. That is, salary and pension are very low-risk items on this risk continuum. At the other end of the extreme are equity-type payments. They include stock options, even profit-sharing plans. They're all the way on the other side. So just picture this. Let's assume that almost all of your remuneration takes the form of senior liability claims on the left-hand side, and there's almost nothing on the right-hand side. What will that motivate you to do? That's the question. Let's assume the distribution is 95-5. Okay, I give up. What happens next? I claim that firms that have that type of maldistribution, the managements of those firms will attempt to maximize size, not value. How come? Because the larger is their responsibility, the greater will be their salary, and the greater will be their salary, the greater will be their pension payments. By the way, this is true almost to this day in Western Europe. You can't get bonuses below senior management to be anything extensive at all. It's just not possible. The political system simply won't accept it. It's politically incorrect. And it's destroying value like crazy. Okay? When the Coca-Cola Company went onto my EVA program back in 1983, we forgot to put bonus schemes in place. I didn't think it was important. I thought if the CEO told you to do something, you would do it. But in 1988, 5 years later, I was giving a talk in Dusseldorf, Germany, and the man sitting next to me at the dinner was the head of Coca-Cola for Germany. His name was Hans. And I said, Hans, how you doing? Oh, terrible, he said. Using your diagram, I'm in category 3. I said, really? Yes, he said, your estimate of RC is 12%. you describe it as 4 points over the government bond rate. I said, yes, I do that to keep it simple, right. So it's 12%, right? He said, yeah. I said, how's your RONA doing? We're only earning 6%. I said, but Coca-Cola as a whole is earning 19%. Yeah, he said, I'm holding them back. I said, why are you doing that? He said, the unions are killing me. I said, why don't you manufacture the syrup in Spain or Portugal? Don't you take those people away from me! I need them for my salary! He actually said that to me. Well, after the talk was over, I went scooting back to my hotel. It was only 10 o'clock at night, 4 o'clock in the afternoon in Atlanta, Georgia. Hello, Peggy, is that you? Joel Stern calling to speak to Mr. Goizueta, your CEO at Coca-Cola. Yeah, lucky day. He's here in a meeting. I said, tell him I'm calling from Germany, and tell him I just had dinner with Hans. And in less than 30 seconds, he's on the phone. He said, Hans is not doing well. I said, I know. I asked him why. He said, did he tell you? I said, yep. He's manufacturing the syrup in Germany so the people will report to him. The more people will report to him, the more assets under management, the more turnover generated, the higher is his salary. Higher is his salary, the higher is his pension. Oh my gosh, he said. We capped his bonus. Yes, he uncapped it. He uncaps the bonus by enlarging the size, getting his salary up, and you give him now 30% of his higher salary, even though he's destroying value. I'm yelling, and he doesn't care. I mean, what's going on here? You know, this is Friday afternoon. He's going to the beach. That's all there is to it. Mr. Goizueta asked me to fly back to Atlanta immediately, which I did the next day. We met with the head of HR, and Stern Stewart had a new project. Listen to this. It's really important. You'll see it now. If you do not find out how incentives are designed in the firm, you will have no way to account for the behavior that is taking place. It is my view that incentives drive behavior. I also believe that the right way to define economics is that economics is the study of how incentives affect behavior. It's as simple as that. Now, here comes the bad news. We all believe that discounted cash flow is a good process. We invest money here, we look at the cash flows, and blah, blah, we do a net present value calculation. But I have some really bad news. You cannot use DCF and NPV to design incentive systems. It's not possible. Because if people lay out the money today and the cash flows are over here, you won't know if that project is positive, zero, or negative NPV until you get to the end of the project. How are you going to pay incentives in here? There is no way to do it. And that's why we created EVA. I'm going to show it to you now. Could you, oh, sorry, and so we know the answer to that free cash flow question. Okay, oh, there it is. There it is. I love what this looks like. Do you mind if I just take a moment to look at my creation? Yes. There it is. If you take the net assets and multiply it by the spread between RONA and C, you will have EVA. And here's the most interesting thing. You can say the value of a firm is equal to the present value of the future free cash flows. But as I've just said to you, you cannot use free cash flows to design incentives. But listen to this. There's now an alternate model of valuation that's even better. It's the capital, the net asset value, plus the present value of the future EVAs. That's the value of the firm. And if that's true, then if we incentivize people to increase EVA, whether they realize it or not, they will be attempting to maximize the value of the organization. It's terribly exciting. I mean, I don't want to stand here and tell you war stories. Listen, I'm the Oprah Winfrey of finance. I'm coming down to you. That's all there is to it. I cannot stand to be up here on this stage. This is driving me crazy. What's the matter? Don't look at me like that. I didn't come to visit you. Where are those pretty girls? Anyway, listen to this. It's real important. Not only is the change in EVA a principal determinant of value, but about 70% of changes in EVA are directly affected by management's discretionary decisions. If you come to your finance faculty and say, how should we design incentives? They might say the same thing my teacher said to me. Merton Miller said, use stock and stock options. But poor Merton Miller, he forgot about the PhD dissertation that was written by a very fine man who teaches at the Wharton School. He lived across the hall from me in the men's graduate dormitory. His name is Marshall Bloom, B-L-U-M-E. And his doctoral dissertation shows that about 50% of stock price changes are affected by what we call changes in states of nature. That's a fancy term for interest rates, exchange rates, government regulation. In other words, things that affect almost all firms across the board over which management has no influence whatsoever. 50% of share price changes are on that. Another 25% are industry factors that are common to all the firms in the same industry. And thus, only 25% is left over for the discretionary performance of management. Now, just think about how dumb an idea then it would be to grant people stock options as their way of building long-term brand value in the firm. I claim it does exactly the opposite. It encourages them to go to church. And they pray like crazy that those other 75% of the determining factors are the ones that win the day, and therefore, for good luck, management wins big time. What a great idea that is. But if changes in EVA are 70% determined by discretionary management decisions, isn't that a far better way to reward people? Because when they try to improve EVA, they have a very large influence on what's going to take place, much larger than the stock options and other such. In fact, I'll go further. Joel, you might as well tell them this. The faculty up here are going to go nuts when they hear it, but what do we care? They may never invite us back. We've been here. Here goes. Market-based incentives are a very bad idea. What's the reason? Listen to this. The first reason I already gave you. 75% of share price changes are unrelated to management's discretionary decisions. Number two, listen to this one. If you do market-based incentives, then how do you reward people downstairs in the organization? Because the only people who affect the consolidated performance of the company are the people on top. But once you go down 1 or 2 or 3 rungs down, if you give people stock or stock options, you're creating what we in economics call a free rider problem. Sit back, relax, and let somebody else do the heavy lifting. That's a really dumb idea. But here comes the third one. This is my home run hit. If you haven't been convinced yet, this next one absolutely flattens you. I was wondering what your faculty looked like flattened. We're about to find out. Today's share value, if modern finance is right, is the present value of the future. So everything that is expected to happen in the future that's relevant is already in today's price. Which means if we deliver exactly the expectations the market has, then the people who are holding these market-based incentives will only earn the required rate of return for risk. And that's an awfully low return for delivering big-time results. That's why I claim you have to use a book value, net asset value concept, because the future performance is not yet in there. What you want to do is give employees a percentage of the improvement in EVA. Okay? You know what's really terrible about this? In just a short time that we're together, I'm covering my entire course. Imagine that. I spend 12 weeks with my students covering this stuff, and we've done the whole thing in just this time. So I'm going to give you each an MBA certificate. From this school, of course. Let me run back up here and just close this by showing you 1 or 2 very quick things. By the way, the motives of behavior that come out of EVA is this. And by the way, I should point out this rule. If EVA is increasing, you're creating value. If EVA is falling, you're destroying value. It's as simple as that. Now, some people who disagree with me, especially at McKinsey, they got this wrong for sure. The McKinsey people say, hey, if you make a new investment, EVA goes down. Just like if you calculate ROI, return on investment, you make an investment, the return on investment goes down immediately because the investment has not yet generated returns. That's going to happen in the future. So it looks really bad. So people say, well, if you make an investment, EVA is going to go south. That's a lousy system, that's for sure. I said, no, it's because you didn't do it right. If you have an investment that does not pay off immediately, what you want to do is create a suspense account off balance sheet and put the investment in there. And you agree in advance to the amortization schedule of that onto your net asset value at the time the returns are coming on stream. However, there's one more thing. You have to charge interest on the money in the suspense account equal to the weighted average cost of capital. And if you do that, it all works out fine. It was interesting. Thank God for Richard Roll. He rescued me on that one. Somebody said, oh, Joel doesn't know what he's talking about, blah, 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 and Richard said, I guess you haven't read the whole paper. That's true. Take a look. There are 3 motives of behavior to increase EVA. Number 1, grow NA, increase NA, as long as you're investing in category 1. In other words, as long as RONA is greater than C. Number 2, greater efficiency. Improve RONA. Increasing RONA always increases EVA. If RONA is less than C and you're down in category 3, then moving in the direction of category 1 also creates value. In other words, if we were destroying value, we're now destroying less value, and that will be reflected in a higher value as well. And finally, if RONA is less than C and we can't fix it, then let's get out of it. We call that harvesting our losers. So we want people to always be thinking about grow, improve, harvest, always in their minds. Next one, okay, real quick. Oh, goodness. And this is our valuation model. It's just what I told you before. And that is, if this is the enterprise value here, debt and equity together, then if this is the net asset value adjusted, in other words, you see what we do? We start with the accounting book value, and we make adjustments by putting the intangibles back on the balance sheet where they belong, and so on. We finally come up with this, and this represents the total resources invested into the firm. And if you subtract that from the enterprise value, you're left with what I call management value added, MVA, and MVA is equal to the present value of the future EVAs. So the EVA's present value, you take EVA now and capitalize it, annuitize it, and then what's left over is delta EVA, and that's where the incentives are, right here. You want the incentives on delta EVA. Okay? I'll just close with the next one, and we'll have to call it quits, because otherwise it'll be dark outside and I won't be able to find my way back to my hotel. Can you? Oh, no, not this one. I don't want to do this one. Yeah, here we are. To successfully implement incentives, you need to do 8 things. Number 1, keep the calculation simple enough that people who have no background in accounting and finance will understand what we're talking about. Okay? No Greek letters. Simple numbers. Let's make sure we understand what's going on. I'm not joking. This is real important. Incidentally, just one very quick example. I went to visit a company in Cape Town, where I teach at the University of Cape Town part of the year, and I went to visit a company that's headquartered there. I walked in, and the receptionist was there, and I walked over and said, I'm having lunch with Trevor, your CEO. And she looked at me and she said, are you really Joel Stern? And I said, yes. And she said, you know, I'm on your EVA program. And I said, I know that too, because I designed the program in this company, and I kept you in mind. You're definitely in the program. And she said, we love you guys. I said, you come any closer and I'm going to call the police. I said, why do you love us? She said, because the last job I had, the only bonus I got at Christmas time was enough to buy 2 Cadbury's chocolate bars. What happened here? Well, I went through your training program on our intranet. That's real simple stuff. I was able to follow it. I said, that's good. What happened? Nothing. Not for 4 months. Then what happened? I overheard in the cafeteria that we're going to hire another admin. I said, how many are you? She said, 8. They wanted to hire a 9th admin, she said. I said, what do you do about that? I thought about it all afternoon. I wrote a letter to the man you're having lunch with. I told him not to hire the 9th. I have enough spare time. I can do that work too. I said, what motivated you to do it? I want to be part of the team, she said. I want to show them that I am a value change agent. I'm a partner in creating value. And what happened then? She said the CEO called me to his office and told me what my bonus would be. It's like a dog. He's right behind me. There we go. Anyway, he said my bonus would be large enough to pay for my 3 children to go to the University of Cape Town, where I would be paying all of their fees. And then she looked at me and she started to cry. I said, what's the matter? We love you guys, she said. I said, tell me why. And she said 3 words to me twice. She said, I am important. I said, you're damn right you are. There are no employees here. You are all partners in the creation of value. They all participate in the percentage improvement in EVA, unit by unit, right down to the shop floor. And by the way, the incentives are not based on consolidated, it's based on the unit in which they're working, where they can actually influence the outcome. It's very important stuff. It doesn't get more important than that. And finally, we don't want it being subject to negotiation. Right now, employees negotiate with their bosses on their budget for the year, and if they hit the budget, they get their bonus. In my opinion, that's a very dumb idea. It gives people a huge incentive to understate what they can deliver. Forget about that negotiation. Instead, make it definitive that they get a percentage of the improvement of what they're delivering. And when they do that, they won't spend any time wasting it on anything except really delivering sustainable results. And finally, the rewards, as you can see, although I have them both listed, it's principally the first one. It's the delta EVA that counts. Notice one more thing. There are to be no caps on the awards. If you think the sky is the limit, you will reach for the sky. But to make that fair to the shareholder, it has to go in both directions. So if you mess up, you have to earn your way back into positive territory, or else you don't get the bonus. And finally, we use a bonus bank to lengthen the decision horizon of the individual. You get your bonus declaration, but only a part is paid now. The rest is held in a bonus bank account that is subject to loss. So if you improve and then deteriorate, your bonus bank can go to a small town in Texas called Bye-Byeville. And by the way, once people realize that and have real money at risk that they can lose, that's how they behave like owners. They don't have to have a share certificate and legal title. They simply have to have an economic interest in what they can influence. And finally, we believe in team awards, not on individual awards. We call it collaboration. I won't bore you with the rest, but may I just say one thing in closing? My plan to come here at this time of the year was simply because I wanted to go to the flower show on Sunday. It's true. I told a man who I'm having lunch with tomorrow, I want to go with him, and he said, I'll take you, and that's why I came. I had no idea there was going to be a bonus available to me, and that is visiting this lovely campus. You should be proud of what we have here. It's a lovely place, and I've had a chance to meet with your faculty and other administrators, and it's an extremely impressive environment. In other words, if you don't do well in life, it's your fault. You're given all of the opportunity here. It is really marvelous, and I say this to you, that if in the future I can find a way to do something at your school in a collaborative way, it would be an honor for me to do it. I feel very good about being here, and I want to just say finally that my dad always used to say to us we should never steal anything from anybody, especially their time, because we can't give that back to them. So I hope over the last hour or so you have experienced what we at Stern Stewart at least call a positive EVA experience. Thank you very much. Now, if you have 1 or 2 questions, we'll do that, and then we'll call it a day, because I don't want to take your weekend away. If you've got kids, much better to be giving hugs and kisses than to listen to me. Anybody? Yeah.
In this bonus band structure that you created, did you ever create a negative bonus band?
Yes, in fact, There's a company in Atlanta, Georgia, private family business called PrintPack. They're in the packaging industry, and they make the package for what we call the brand Wise potato chips. That's one of the things they do. And they went onto my EVA program at the beginning of the recession in 1991, unfortunately. And so the recession began in July, okay, and their fiscal date was June 30th. So they go onto my program, and the first thing that happens is they head straight south, okay, with gigantic bonus bank declarations that are negative. And so the CEO called me on the phone the following year, and he said, they'd like you to come back and answer some questions, but they will have guns ready to blaze, okay? So I went to a toy store to buy, you know, they have the bullets going across like this. So I took my coat off, and there I was standing there ready to contend with them. But they looked at me and they said, what the hell have you done to us? And the CEO said to me, our people are threatening to resign and then come back the following day and apply for the job so that it will erase their negative bonuses. And I said, that's what makes it so difficult to be the CEO. Of course, you have to make the global choices. If these people quit on that basis, you got to tell them they're never coming back. And the reason I remember this man in particular is that he is the brother of Davis Love III, the great golfer. He was kidding at the meeting. He said, I knocked my brains out and my brother goes off to play golf. But it was a fantastic thing. His name is Dennis Love. Dennis looked at me and he said, I will tell the management team what you've said, and let's hope for the best that nobody quits. I said, tell them one more thing. This recession will be mild and short, and by next year at this time, the improvement in performance will be so huge, all the bonus banks that are negative will have been erased, and they'll be right back into big bonus territory. And sure enough, that was true. The most cyclical industry in the country, by the way, is always in the packaging industry. Okay? Anybody else? Well, again, may I just say my warmest thanks to you for putting up with all of this. I love this subject. I love people. I want them to do as well as they possibly can, and I don't want anybody being ripped off. This is one way to defend the little guy. Thank you.